MSNBC.
What I propose, incidentally, would not touch the taxes of 99.7%. I'm talking about 0.3% of the American public. But the people from $1 million on up, I think, should be asked to share in a little of the sacrifice that we're all being asked to share.
That was Warren Buffett on his New York Times op-ed saying it's time for the government to stop coddling people like him. He wants Washington to raise taxes on the rich to help stem the tide of debt. Democrats cheered. It made my next guest, Harvey Golub, mad as hell. Golub's a wealthy man himself. He served as CEO of American Express from 1993 to 2001. Last week, Golub responded in the Wall Street Journal calling Buffett dead wrong. Golub said he deeply resented the idea that he was coddled. He says top earners pay the lion's share of federal income taxes, while nearly half of workers pay no income taxes at all. Golub also argues Uncle Sam should raise revenue more fairly and spend it more wisely before asking him to pay more. After all, he says, I did earn it. Well, I think Harvey Golub is dead wrong on taxes and that he's missing the bigger picture. I don't know if I'll persuade him, but I appreciate that he was willing to join me today to engage on it all. Welcome, Harvey.
Thank you, Matt.
Here's the context I want to suggest for this broader tax conversation. Right now, we're in a period where, for a decade, we've been at war as a nation. And this is the first time in a period of war where we've first cut taxes for the best off folks in society and then made it a priority politically to keep taxes lower on the wealthy. We're on the eve of the baby boomers' retirement, where, as you know, we're going to double the number of seniors on Social Security and Medicare. Taxes will have to go up on all Americans, I believe, not just the best off, but on the middle class, something our politicians won't fess up to. And then third, we're also in a situation where in the last few decades, the income for those at the top has really been surging, almost doubling as a share of the national income, because folks like you and me in the lower upper class, to a lesser extent, have been the beneficiaries of lots of changes in the global economy. Given that context, why should folks like us, again, me to a lesser extent, but you as well, be exempt from contributing to the fiscal adjustment we know the country needs when we're racking up trillions in debt every year?
There are probably several reasons why that argument is erroneous. The first, and I think it would have to deal with questions of whether or not it would work, and secondly, basic elements of fairness. The assumption that one could raise the rates on people earning $1 million or more and collect the money that is estimated could be collected. The CBO estimates if that were the case, the collection would be about $50 billion a year, assuming people did not change behavior. $50 billion a year on $1.5 trillion deficit is a rounding error.
But why do you have to solve the problem to have a fair sharing of the burden of fixing the problem?
Let me try and finish the question. Second issue is that the money would not actually be raised. People would change their behavior. They would seek to make investments in ways that would not result in paying that kind of income tax. Every tax cut that we have ever put into effect, marginal tax cut that we've ever put into effect, has increased the amount of money that we raise through taxation.
But that's because
every time we raise the rates, we reduce the amount we collect.
Yeah, I guess some of these are almost matters of ideology where we may disagree, because, I mean, I worked in the Clinton White House. Clinton raised taxes on the top 2%. We had an economic boom, as you know. You were in the business world at that time. It was a good time for the economy. The idea that a few more marginal points in income tax at the margin for the best off in society, I think, you know, guys like Pete Peterson, other business leaders you respect, would say it's not going to have some impact on economic growth or the things you're concerned about. And on the fairness point, I want to put up some facts, because one thing I think, there's a lot of folks who get their information from the Wall Street Journal, which focuses, as you did in your piece, on the share of federal income taxes that are borne by the people at the top. But if you look at the total tax burden, all federal taxes, which, as you know, doesn't include just income tax, but the payroll tax, excise taxes, and there's state and local tax, property taxes. We've got a chart I want to put up. If you look at the total tax burden in the United States, the top 1%, whose average income is about $1.3 million, earn about 19.4% of the income and pay about 21.5% of the total taxes, slightly more than their income share, but not something that's, you know, the slippery slope to Sweden. The middle 20%, whose average income is around $55,000, earn 13% of the income, pay around 10% of the taxes. And then the bottom 20%, obviously those really struggling, $17,000 in income, 4% of the national income, just 2% of the taxes. When you look at that, we don't have some remarkably progressive tax system. You could make an argument that we should actually have something somewhat more progressive, and I don't understand what's not fair about that, and why those who are best off, especially at a time of war, shouldn't be asked to pay more to contribute to the fiscal adjustment we know the nation needs.
All right, that's a very long question. And there's some premises.
It's part statement and part question, obviously.
And there are some premises in the statement that I would take issue with.
Like?
Most of the money that is paid in federal taxes are the Medicare taxes and the Social Security taxes, which are directly tied to the benefits that people receive.
That's not actually true, because Medicare people get much more back than they put in. That's another...
Oh, so do people in Social Security. But it is tied to the individual and not to general purposes.
But it's used that way.
The income tax raises about $800 billion a year, and the people who are in the top 10%, which is a group of people that are over $300,000, pay the vast bulk of that. So
but they also earn the vast bulk of the income. That's the whole point.
You can't, not the vast bulk of the income.
They do.
You put together payroll taxes and Medicare taxes and separated that from income taxes. Payroll taxes are more a per capita tax than they are an income tax.
But it's a total tax burden on average Americans.
And the president did not suggest raising anything other than income tax on what he calls millionaires and billionaires, which are anybody earning $250,000 a year or more. That is the issue. My objection is not in paying more taxes. I pay plenty of taxes now, and I would not object if I were paying more taxes, if in fact the process for collecting the tax was an equitable one, and I could define what that means.
But are you really going to say it as a very well-off ex-CEO, you're not being treated fairly?
You're going to let me finish answering the question. And if the money was spent prudently, but it is not. We spent $1 trillion on a stimulus program, most of which went to state and local governments to delay laying off people that had to go for a year. There was no economic benefit from that activity.
Well, tell that to the people who didn't get fired because the state budget holes were being plugged.
They got fired a year later, Matt, and we increased our debt by $2 trillion.
Harvey Golub, we're not going to agree on all this, but maybe there'll be a chance to continue the conversation somehow, because I do think, and I'd urge you and other business leaders to consider, that as part of the fiscal adjustment we need in a nation at war, the idea that folks who are civic leaders and business leaders like yourself think there's something wrong with being asked to contribute more as part of a massive adjustment when so many Americans are really taking it on the chin.
Matt, we're not being asked. If people ask me, I have a choice. If you raise the tax rates, I'm not being asked, I'm being compelled. I go to jail if I don't pay it.
Right, taxes are something we do. It's the price of a civilized society.
But of course it is. But it's not being asked.
It's a proposal.
Well, it's not a proposal, it would be a command.
Once it becomes a law through the democratic process.
Once it becomes a law, right.
Right. All right, we're going to be on opposite sides of these, I think. I'm not going to give up on the fact that you may see the light at some point. Look at the distribution tables, because I think most people are getting it on the chin. People like us, I at the lower upper class end, you at the higher. What we should do is go get, if you say you've looked at the distribution tables and it doesn't change your argument, I think you're not looking at these things the right way. We should find a way to actually get a set of economists we agree on, and then if I persuade you differently, maybe you'll eat your op-ed, and if not, I'll eat it here.
Yeah. You'll eat it here.
Well, I'm not going out to shop for Rolaids, so we'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Harvey Golub, for engaging on this. I'm sure our mega panel is going to have something to say about this debate as well. That's Democratic strategist and former congressional candidate Crystal Ball, Reuters editor-at-large Chrystia Freeland, and Democratic strategist David Goodfriend. Welcome all. Crystal in D.C., let me start with you.
Sure.
What did you make of the contours of this tax conversation? Who's right?
Well, it was a great conversation and very interesting. I, of course, come down much more on your side, Matt. And the thing that I can't understand is this. How can you have an ideology that on the one hand says it's not fair, I'm getting taxed too much as a wealthy American, and on the other hand is saying we have 50% of Americans who don't pay any income tax, we need to raise taxes on the poor and the lower class. I can't understand this. And if you look at it, if you take head-to-head Warren Buffett and Harvey Golub, and you take the broader perspective, look at 1992. The top 400 income earners paid about 29% of their taxes in income taxes, compared to 2008, they only paid 21%. So we've had a historic reduction in tax rates for the wealthiest Americans, and we have a situation where everyone is talking about deficit reduction. Primarily, that's impacting the lower class, the middle class, and we're not asking the wealthiest Americans to do anything, and that is fairness. That's what's fair.
Now, Christia, the one thing I did think that both Harvey Golub and the Republicans generally, one very strong talking point they have in their messaging now is because, due to, in part, Republican-supported policies like the Earned Income Tax Credit that Milton Friedman invented, Ronald Reagan supported, you've got a lot of folks at the lower income land off the tax rolls. I wonder if Democrats wouldn't be well advised to say that everyone needs to pay something, $100, $200, $300 a year, even at the lower income level, in order to take that peg of their argument away and make it possible to have the broader discussion about tax fairness that is not easy to have, as you can tell, with the other side.
Sure, I think that's a very politically wise suggestion, and it's what we do at church or at school raffles. The idea is everybody contributes just a little bit so that you have full participation. But I thought, Matt, that the really key point that you made that I think is not understood enough in this discussion is the fact that the structure of the economy is changing. We are living in more of a winner-take-all society than we have lived in since before the Great Depression. The last peak was 1929. And even as the income distribution has shifted to favor the super rich, we've actually proportionately been taxing them less. So I really think they don't have a leg to stand on. What worries me is I think we're also starting to live in two very different societies, and both in terms of the world they live in, with private jets, private schools, gated communities, but also their own economic activity, an economic activity which is focused on the emerging markets, maybe focused on luxury goods. I think we're increasingly in a place where the super rich don't need the middle class anymore. And I think that's very dangerous for the political culture.
David, I want to get you in, but I know, Christia, you're working on a book on that very theme, so we'll come back and give that the promotion it deserves whenever...
it's my hobby horse, sorry.
Well, it's a perfect fit, though, with what exactly the encounter, I think, and the nature of the dialogue we just saw. David Goodfriend, what do you make of it all?
Well, sorry to pile on Harvey here, but I think he's suffering from some form of economic amnesia. When you have a statement from him like, I've never seen a tax increase actually raise revenue, I've never seen a tax cut do anything but raise revenue. Let me give you two data points, okay? When my former boss and yours, Matt, came to office, Bill Clinton proposed an across-the-board budget cut and tax increase to balance the budget. It passed without a single Republican vote, and what happened? Revenues went up, and the economy improved because people's long-term interest rates like mortgages went down. Then we had George W. Bush, and what did he do? Not one, not two, but three tax cuts, and what happened? A bloated deficit with Medicare Part D, added expenditures, and the Iraq War. So the facts speak for themselves that Harvey's wrong. He's just wrong. That in this case, you actually have a better functioning economy. The data shows that when Clinton was president, when Truman was president, you had examples, Kennedy, you have examples of where the tax code, Reagan, the tax code was actually higher than it is today. Why don't we go back to Reagan's tax code and we'd actually have a better budget? The fact of the matter is this religious adherence to tax cuts solve all problems has just been proven wrong, and they're not willing to admit it on the facts.
We'll obviously come back to more of those facts as we continue to pound on these economic issues. Next, back to the big economic story dominating the day. We talked about the unemployment problem. After the break, a member of the President's Jobs Council on how to fix it.